Afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Shaffer, and welcome to this BeFloodReady webinar on an action plan for being flood ready. We just opened the gates and we've got a few people coming in. I just want to give people a few more minutes just before we start going through the housekeeping. So if you bear with me for a minute or so, we'll just let people enter the webinar. Okay, thanks to those that have joined us. As I said, this is a webinar for an action plan for being flood ready, and it's been delivered by CIWEM's community of practice on property flood resilience called Be Flood Ready. So just before I pass you over to the chair, which is Fola, I will just run through some housekeeping. So the webinar is being recorded and it's going to be placed on CIWEM's YouTube channel within a couple of weeks. If you experience any technical issues with sound or posing questions or anything, please do use the chat function for that. We are really keen to have any questions from you, both in terms of anything related to the specifics of the presentation on the Flood Ready Action Plan and also any more general discussion questions. So please do use the Q&A function for that. And basically there will be an opportunity for you to vote on the most popular questions as well. So if there's a question as we go through the presentation, please do add that. But if there's anything you would like to ask our panelists as well, please do raise questions there and also say who the question is for. So without any further ado, I will just introduce you to Fola Gonyaye, who's our chair of the Be Flood Ready Community of Practice and also leads on TJ Consulting. So over to you, Fola.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today. I'm quite chuffed, so hopefully you are. This is the Be Flood Ready webinar for an action plan for being flood ready. For those new to PFR, this is an approach used to reduce the damage and disruption caused by flooding. The CIWEM Be Flood Ready Community of Practice provides a national platform for those delivering and those interested in PFR. Its primary purpose is to provide an opportunity to share updates, good practice, and provide a safe place for peer-to-peer learning. Paul will provide a bit more information about the community of practice later. This event and all the activities of CIWEM, Be Flood Ready, will not be possible without the kind support of its partners and supporters, as you can see in the slide. And I'm sure CIWEM, myself, and the whole of the industry will be really pleased and would like to say thank you for what they do and continue to do. Today's webinar will cover the Flood Ready Action Plan launched in the autumn last year. I personally recall the original PFR review in 2016, which was quite timely for where we were then, and which recommended some great stuff that's helped us to where we are today. Since then, we've had the Code of Practice, British Standard BS 851188, British Standard BS 85500, Pathfinder projects, the EA PFR framework, and even ongoing flood and coastal resilience innovation projects, which many of them are delivering PFR for the industry. So we've moved forward since that time. And really, this new action plan focuses on measures to reduce flood risk at the property level, both inside and outside. It also outlines what's required by a variety of organizations, to help mainstream PFR. Now, I've read the action plan myself, and I believe it does a fantastic job of consolidating the progress since the PFR review. and its recommendations can really help us accelerate the mainstreaming of PFR. So this afternoon is your opportunity to get an overview of the action plan, hear from the representatives that are either interested in PFR, are involved in its delivery, or actively involved in delivering some of the 22 recommendations within the action plan. We'll first have an overview of the action plan, a few minutes for specific technical questions on the action plan, then we'll have a discussion with our panelists. You can see the very eminent list of panelists on the slide. So please be ready to ask questions to our panel through the Q&A, as Paul has already intimated you. So we're hopefully I'm the one that stands between you and finishing at 4:15, and hopefully by that time we'll have had a really great session. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Tatiana Chilovsky from DEFRA and Richard Taylor from the Environment Agency, who will provide an overview of the FloodReady Action Plan. Both Tatiana and Richard were integral parts of the team that helped Professor Peter Bonfield deliver the FloodReady Action Plan. So if you have any questions, please, as they are talking, just jot it down in the Q&A function. Also, please vote for any questions you're interested in hearing the response to, which will help prioritize which ones we actually bring to you in case we can't do everything. So over to you, Tatiana and Richard.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Fola. So good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. So as Fola says, myself and Tatiana are going to do a bit of a double act on this. So I'm Richard Taylor from the Environment Agency, and Tatiana is from DEFRA. So the review itself, as Fola mentioned, was undertaken by Professor Peter Bonfield. He was an independent chair appointed by the Environment Agency. His day job is as Vice Chancellor of Westminster University. And was also formerly the chief exec of the Building Research Establishment. And during the review, Peter was supported by a small team, including myself and Tatiana. Peter's commission ended with the publication in October. That's why myself and Tatiana are here to present and promote the work. So this is these bullet points are what we're going to run through. In the next 20 or so minutes. We'll explain a little bit of the aspects of PFR that were covered by the review. We'll go through a little bit of the context around why a review was needed and importantly, why now. We'll also talk about the evidence gathering and all the engagement that took place for this review, which sectors are involved and their contributions. We won't go through all the recommendations and actions that it came up with. As Fola said, there were 22 recommendations. There's lots more actions as well. You can read those in the report itself, and there will be a QR code at the end of the presentation, which you can scan to access the report. So next slide, please. This slide might seem a bit odd to include in a presentation to the BeFloodReady PFR community of practice. But through working in this space and as part of this review, I often find that the definition of PFR varies. Some people believe it's all about stopping every single drop of water entering a property. Some take the view that it's very difficult to stop all water entering a property, so PFR is about reducing the damages. But in this review, we tried to take an all-encompassing view. So starting with preparedness, so property owners and occupiers really understanding their risks, so checking the maps that are publicly available, understanding what that means, signing up for flood warnings and coming up with a plan to act on those warnings as well. Resistance is important to some. So investing in and utilising methods to try and keep as much water out as possible, but recognising that they do have their limitations. Recoverability, so if the water does get in, then internal adaptations can be made to reduce the damage caused by floodwater should it enter. So that might include things like hard flooring, a resilient kitchen, waterproof plaster on your walls, raising your electrics, and other things. And also reduction as well. So using property level measures such as rain gardens, permeable paving, water storage devices and things like that to capture the rainwater that falls on a particular property and try and reduce water runoff as much as possible. So those are the things that we covered as part of this review. As I said, we tried to encompass as much of it as possible. So next slide, please. So crucially, why was a review needed? And also the question that's not on there is why now? So many of you on this call will be aware that Peter did a similar review into PFR around about 10 years ago. And that one was aimed at enabling better uptake of resilience measures for properties at high flood risk. At the end of that review, an action plan was produced and significant steps were achieved. And it was all overseen, and still is because it's still going, by a property flood resilience roundtable, which brought together the public and private sectors, all who have some kind of stake in moving PFR forward. Some of the key achievements, I mean, Fowler's mentioned a few already following the first review. So a PFR Code of Practice published by Syria, setting out the standards that should be achieved while surveying, installing and commissioning PFR installations. Training on the Code of Practice and a certification scheme for competent PFR professionals, both run by CIWEM. And the training's been running for a few years. The Register of Competent Professionals is now up and running as of last year. An updated British standard for resistance products and also one for resilience measures. The standard for resistance products has robust requirements for testing, as well as factory audits that are needed to demonstrate that the products are consistent and being manufactured in accordance with the specifications. And a lot of engagement and communication with home and business owners has happened as well. And that's been both through local events. Fowler mentioned the 3 government-funded PFR Pathfinder projects, but also since then, some of the legacy aspects from those Pathfinders, for example, the Flood Pod and the Floodmobile, have been used to get out into local communities to really talk to them about their risk and the benefits of making their property more resilient to flooding. As well as that, we had the national BeFlood Smart campaign run jointly by FloodReady and the Environment Agency, using all sorts of local and national media, social media influencers to try and get those key messages out there. But things have moved on. We've had significant flood events during the last 10 years. We'll all be familiar with some of these names like Kiara, Dennis, Babette, Kieran, Henk, Franklin, among others, seeing many properties affected by flooding. And we've also had a new assessment of flood risk published last year, which shows that there are estimated to be around 6.3 million properties at risk of flooding in England, which is expected to rise to around 8 million by the middle of the century. And the numbers of properties at risk from surface water flooding in particular has risen by 43% since our previous assessment, and that's due to improvements in our modelling capabilities for surface water flooding. But critically, 83% of the properties at high risk of surface water flooding are likely to have flood depths of less than 30 centimetres, which could potentially be better managed through things like PFR measures. We've also had a change in government. So when in shadow, our now Floods Minister, Emma Hardy, showed a keen interest in what role PFR can play in supporting people to better manage their risk and recover more quickly from flooding. And so when appointed to her current role, she made it very clear that she wanted to see tangible action in this space and gave the FloodReady review her full backing. So all of these different ingredients meant it was the right time to relook at PFR and how to encourage and enable greater use of it to reduce flood damage to properties. Okay, next slide. So Peter was very keen to involve a wide range of stakeholders. He was eager that this review shouldn't solely be about the role of government and other public sector organisations, but more around creating the right conditions for the market to grow. So a leadership group from sectors including insurance, lending, housing, construction, skills, research and others was brought together to obtain the evidence, to shape the findings and to commit to actions. And I'm really pleased that Charles Rowe, who was part of that leadership group, as well as Paul and others on the call, will be on the panel to answer questions in a few minutes. So this group engaged within their sectors to bring different voices together, to articulate what they can bring to the table, but also what they need from others to help move the PFR market in the right direction. And engagement didn't just happen with this group of sector leads, but further engagement happened beyond this group and beyond their sectors to help galvanise our understanding and what outcomes this review was seeking to achieve. So we engage with risk management authorities, the third sector, charities supporting flooded individuals and communities, devolved administrations, academia, residential landlords, and perhaps most importantly, those who have been flooded themselves or are part of flood groups representing communities at high risk of flooding. And this engagement allowed us to build the evidence and the narrative and the actions that are needed to get us on the path to building resilient people and properties. And now I'll hand over to Tatiana to take us through the review findings.
Thank you, Richard, for setting that all out so clearly. So as Richard mentioned, I'm going to now take you through the structure of the report and the findings, which are based around essentially 6 overarching themes, which we'll go through in more detail in the next slide. But these are underpinned by, as been mentioned several times already, 22 recommendations, and actually I counted them 49 actions that are split over 1, 5, and 10-year outcomes. That's why we're not presenting them all in detail today. It would just be too much. Could you go to the next slide, please, Paul? So these are the 6 overarching themes of the review. Essentially, they are the large pieces of the puzzle that need to come together to achieve our objective of mainstreaming PFR. The first of these is a coherent and growing demand. What do we mean by this? I'm sure a lot of you on the call will be familiar with the history of PFR and the fact that the market has been subject to what we call a boom-bust cycle, which means that demand rises after a flood event and then dies down. So it's not a really sustainable business at the moment. So a coordinated and trusted approach is needed to drive uptake across sectors, and there are different actors and organizations that can help with this, which are all set out in the report. But I'll quickly mention these. So, of course, government has its role to play with its large flood investment program delivered through the EA's pipeline of projects and the PFR framework. So that is going to continue. And that's a big driver of demand. Of course, the risk management authorities that also deliver these projects, the local flood authorities, but also water companies who invest in PFR measures are a big part of the picture here. The insurance sector with initiatives like Build Back Better, which basically offers £10,000 to rebuild your home post-flooding in a more resilient way and to install PFR measures is a big driver. Lenders also have a role to play, and we'll hear more from Charles, who's on the call today, I'm sure. They consider at the moment flooding as being one of their top 5 risks, and so could also incentivize or require PFR measures in homes. Housing associations, who formed part of the leadership group through the National Housing Association, who manage millions of homes, also have the potential to roll out PFR at scale. Of course, all the property owners who want to protect themselves and take action are part of the demand. And in the longer term, once the market has scaled up a little bit, there is really big potential for the UK to be an international market leader in this space. There aren't many countries who are experts in these kind of measures at the moment. And the Department of Business and Trade is quite interested in this. The second piece of the puzzle is, of course, the products and services. So again, in the past, there has been some poor behavior, both with the quality of products, but the installation of PFR measures. So this needs to be improved. And of course, the demand side needs to be supported by trusted products and services. So there are multiple recommendations and actions in the report to help with this around, of course, trusted products with the development of certified and tested products, registers of competent professionals, those who design, install, and promote PFR should be appropriately trained, be able to assess the right measures put in the right places, and these products need to be accessible. So builders, merchants, DIY providers, other suppliers need to promote the products in store and online. The third piece of the puzzles is sources of information. These need to be trusted sources of information. This is essential both for the demand and the supply side. It needs to be accurate, user-friendly, to enable informed decisions. So this includes access to flood risk information, but also guidance on products, installation, maintenance. As part of this, there's also an interesting kind of innovative product that is being developed, which is a flood performance certificate, which could, on the one hand, help homeowners understand how vulnerable their property is to flooding, what measures could be taken to reduce risk, but also provide a consistent way of documenting flood resilience of buildings. The fourth piece of the puzzle is one that was a little bit tricky to draft, but is really important to PFR. Richard was setting out that's one of the 4 components we consider as being part of PFR, which is reducing water runoff at property level, which would just make the problem worse. So we have a section in the report which recommends more implementation of permeable paving, rain gardens, rainwater harvesting. We actually heard from several people throughout the review that having these measures in place are sometimes what can make the difference between water ingress into a property or no water ingress. Fifth piece of the puzzle is the regulatory and legislative framework, which needs to be appropriate and further embed the use of PFR in existing and new buildings to protect consumers and help build the trusted market. So this involves work from government in strengthening the place of PFR through, for example, building regulations or statutory documents. But there's also an important component, which is the joining up with other initiatives such as energy efficiency or building safety, which could help optimize costs, but also limit disruption. If you're going into a home to install energy efficiency measures, why not do PFR at the same time? This would, on top of it, protect what you're implementing in the first place in a home. And then all of this and all the recommendations need to be underpinned by research and innovation to enable a thriving market. There's some short-term work in this space and some longer-term work. The shorter-term work is assembling a community of practice. Not community of practice, community of research. And then as time goes, a test bed to track the effectiveness of PFR. And that is underway thanks to UKRI, who formed part of the leadership group as well. Could you go to the next slide, please, Paul? So I hope that will help better understand now how our outcomes are working, what we'd like to see in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years. So obviously in 1 year, there's already a lot that can be done, actually. We're going to start seeing a register of competent professionals that are trained in PFR, and we'd like to see that grow, of course. CIWEM's got a great certification programs already working with other partners of FloodReady to take this forward and embed in other areas. Of course, government will continue to invest in PFR and deliver its flood program. We'd like to see products visible in major DIY stores and builders merchants. That's already in train as well. UKRI will fund a PFR research network. A prototype of an FPC, flood performance certificate, will be available for piloting. And insurers will continue to make efforts to mainstream Build Back Better measures. Next slide, please, Paul. So our year 5 outcomes, these are spread on 2 slides. There's quite a bit we'd like to see in 5 years, as there will be a bit of time to work on all these actions in the meantime. So we'd like to see a register of certified and approved products available, and we'd like to see that register grow with PFR products that have been proven for use through certification and approval. We'd like PFR to start becoming normalized in people's minds to manage certain types of flooding. As Richard mentioned before, strong interest in the surface water flood risk management space. We want to see strong availability of competent construction professionals available through clear registers, and we'd like to see PFR products stocked regularly and normally in different builders, merchants, and different types of suppliers. Next slide, please, Paul. Because the FPC will have been developed, it can then be piloted. So there will be quite a few years, I think, of piloting. We'd like to see it at a reasonable scale. We're hoping that BBB will become mainstreamed through insurers. The PFR research will have developed a roadmap, and a strong research network will have been built to support future innovation. Work will have progressed by government to strengthen PFR and regulatory framework. That's already underway. And yeah, we'll see what's possible in the planning system and in building regulations. Next slide, please, Paul. Our year 10 outcomes are essentially our major goals here. We would like PFR to be fully integrated in building regulations, the planning system, so that new homes and businesses are resilient to flooding, can recover quickly. We'd like to see flood performance certificates used as normal, be quite a common tool, like an energy performance certificate. Any kind of building retrofit projects, we'd like them to systematically be considering flood resilience. That needs to be introduced at the same time. Research and innovation will be highly regarded, and there'll be strong international collaboration. And by then, we hope that PFR will have an established export market. So, as has been mentioned before, I think the main takeaway from this piece of work is just how collaborative it has to be, and that everybody really has a whole role to play, and that each piece of the puzzle needs to move forward kind of at similar paces. And I think that's the spirit Peter worked in throughout the review. Thank you. I think I'll be handing back to Fola now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tatiana and Richard. Thank you for that great presentation. Again, one of the things I like about this new report, it really moves along where CIWEM and others have been pushing the last few years to look at PFR, but also recognize that things like SODs at property level can be linked together, and you know, having one of the actual themes relating to sort of surface water, reducing stuff from property is actually fantastic, and I think this will really help us do this much better. I've been looking at the questions, and can I just encourage people to put questions on the Q&A? If not, you'll end up with questions from me. You don't really want that. You want to hear answers to questions that you want, and we've got a fantastic panel joining us. What I'll do, and I'll just ask one general question. Actually, this might be more for Paul to answer. Can people get a copy of the presentation? My guess is yes, but you might be able to say a bit more.
Yeah, so hi, so the recording will definitely go onto YouTube. But if Richard and Tatiana are happy, we can also put a PDF of the presentation that will be on the BeFloodReady resource area. So you can be able to find it there. So we're happy to add that information.
Fantastic. Looking at the next question, actually, it's quite a broad question that I think will benefit from some of the other panels in there. So at this point, I'd like to invite the panel to join. And hopefully their faces start showing up one by one. Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Perhaps I'll just start by asking the panel to introduce themselves. Basically, who you are, who you represent, and perhaps just why perhaps you're leaning to PFR and here today. So I'll start with Ian Gibbs. Just looking at my screen here. Ian.
Hi everyone, my name is Ian Gibbs. I'm a building surveyor, worked in the insurance industry for a number of years. And the reason I'm on this webinar today, and pleased to be, is I'm chair of the Flood Resilience Roundtable at the moment.
Fantastic. Charles Rowe.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Charles Rowe. My day job, I'm Director of Mortgages at UK Finance. And for those of you who don't know who UK Finance are, we are the trade association for the banking and finance industry. We have 120 mortgage lenders on our books. So as you can imagine, as Tatiana and as Richard said, flooding and flood risk is vitally important for those mortgage providers in terms of making sure those homeowners have got a home that is safe and watertight to live in. But as well as being chair of, as well as being a director of mortgages at UK Finance, I am also chair of the FloodReady Leadership Group, which is the leadership group which is taking forward the recommendations included in the FloodReady report, which was produced last year. So I'm delighted to continue to work across the industry in helping homeowners and ensuring that the industry is ready for flood resilience and building back better.
Thanks very much, Charles. Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan Cassian, Head of Research at FloodReady, and I was part of the Secretariat working on a couple of different strands, and also in my day job lead some of the related work, such as the FPC Flood Performance Certificate project.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jonathan. Graham Brogden.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Graham Brogden. I'm now working as a consultant in the PFR space, but formerly I worked for Aviva Insurance, and I was chair of the roundtable from 2016 through to 22, which is when we launched that first action plan and saw that through. I'm now also currently chair of IPFRA, the new International Property Flood Resilience Association.
Fantastic. Thank you, Graham. And Leo Brandt.
I'm Leo Bryant, Policy and Advocacy Manager at the British Red Cross. The British Red Cross responds with humanitarian support and assistance in flood disasters, and we frequently see that the impacts of flooding is felt most keenly by those on low incomes and have other vulnerabilities to flooding. And our recent research, Water's Edge, highlighted recommendations that include improving access to PFR in the social housing sector and to other households and communities affected by poverty.
Thank you very much for that. And just to check that I've not missed out any panelists. Good, I'm safe there. Great. So what I'll do is I'll ask the first question actually that came up, which was the reason I thought I'd go straight into this. This question is from Sonia. Building more reduces groundwater storage and direction. So many variables to consider alongside upgrading pipework. Can we do more? Now, I thought this not just been general PFR, but broader things. I thought actually useful to get a broader cross-section of thoughts on this. And I'll actually leave anyone who might want to answer that first.
Yeah, I'll start on this one on FOLA. So great question, Sonia. With flood risk management, there are always a lot of variables to consider, and that's why we tend to look at sort of a range of different options to try and manage risk appropriately, because, as you've quite rightly articulated, there are some areas which are at which have areas of high groundwater, which we need to protect them to keep that storage available to us. So actually so Peter, through the review, described flood risk management and PFR has been a bit like a jigsaw. And so there are lots of different component parts, and so making sure that the right ones stick together is very, very, very important. So ground walls flooding is kind of one of those underrepresented risks. We do a lot on fluvial, we do a lot on coastal, where surface water is now coming up the agenda a little bit more because groundwater is hidden. It has in the past tended to be sort of the poor relation, but I'll just highlight that there are some of the flooding coastal resilience innovation projects that are looking specifically at groundwater. So I think Buckinghamshire and Lincolnshire are two of them. So looking forward to looking at the outputs from those and seeing what they've learned there. Thanks.
Fantastic. Anyone else wants to add to that? Paul.
Paul,
yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I think some of this is also about that integration piece about what could be done with regard to overall flood risk management in terms of understanding where SUDS fits in. And I noticed there's a question that's just come up actually asking about the National Planning Policy Framework. So that's recently come out for consultation and updating that. So there's reference in there with regards to sustainable drainage and climate change. So if there's people on here that are really keen to manage flood risk, I'd ask them to look at those sections. I can't remember what the actual where the reference is, but there is a reference to sustainable drainage, and there may be opportunities to make that a little bit more stronger, maybe more prescriptive, and also there may be opportunities to promote the role of PFR, and it may take a while for that to be legislated in terms of included in building regulations or included in planning. But the earlier we can start saying that and demonstrate there's a requirement for that, the better the outcomes will be.
Fantastic, thanks, Paul. I'll give one more response from Ian. Ian, please.
Yeah, it was just to say that the big scale requirements to deal with the risk of flooding for building houses, but PFR's changed recently because previously we think about, as we say, doors and barriers and keeping the water out and making it more recoverable when the water gets in, but also it could be thinking about your garden, thinking about water storage at a property level, and stopping the peak flow go into the drains. And this, whereas probably 2 or 3 years ago, wouldn't even been considered. Whereas now on the Build Back Better scheme, that would be okay to spend money in those sorts of areas. So I think there's macro things to be done, but also at property scale, it's now part of what we think of as PFR.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Ian. What I'd like to do now is just go back to the panel and ask a question. What has changed in the last 2 to 3 years that makes now the time to sort of, a mainstream PFR? And I'll probably start with Graham, being the one who chaired the last, used to chair the round table. I mean, what's your thought? Just in the last few years, why is now the time to mainstream PFR?
Yeah, well, I think awareness since the first report was launched is now much better than it was back then. And even though that was launched in 2016, or started in 2016, and the Code of Practice launched in 2020, awareness out there generally was still pretty low. But that's been helped since the insurers introduced Build Back Better. I think that's given the opportunity for property owners to understand that things can be done differently. And it's taken a while for them to kind of buy into that, I think, but it's definitely helped. More recently than that is, I think IPFRA is, and I would say this, Chair, but IPFRA has been launched and it's pulling the industry together now. So for years, we've been working with an industry that's been very segmented, very working on their own sort of individual basis. IPFRA now has got a platform where we can bring those in, and all of the key people are now in IPFRA, but start to build on that and build the industry, which will help mainstream it even further. Things like the new test centre in Hull, obviously, is an added benefit on top of something that has been struggled with in the past. Keyword, the new accreditation company, is out there now. So there's more competition coming in, more sort of things that's going to help promote it and develop it. And it's not, and this is one of Mary's analogy, but it's not seen as an individual thing now. It's part of the jigsaw. So PFR doesn't sit on the side as a last resort. It's very much brought into the mainstream, and that's what this is all about. So yeah, I think things have moved on quite nicely, but still a long way to go.
Fantastic. Anyone else wants to contribute to that before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, I'll come in if I may, Fola. I think that from a lender perspective, and as Graham was saying, from a consumer perspective, awareness has definitely increased with the greater use of things like social media, the immediacy of that. So you get, whether it's Instagram or whether it is live feeds from people's homes in terms of what it's like when they get flooded. But I would also say in terms of climate change as well, people are much more aware of the hotter summers that we're getting. When rainfall falls, it is causing more flooding than it perhaps has done in the past. And as we talked about earlier, it's this surface water runoff issue, which is a big issue now for homeowners. And from a lender perspective, let's not forget, and also from a homeowner perspective, that FloodReady will, at the moment, finish its remit in 2039. So if you are taking out a new mortgage, or if you're a lender granting a mortgage to somebody that's going to be for 30 years, you're looking to the future and saying, actually, from 2026, another 30 years, I've got, so that's going to be 2056. I've got 17 years there where those homeowners might not be able to get cover or afford cover for that property, which has had affordable insurance against flood risks for the past 10, 15 years. So there's it's much greater awareness of all those things. And I know Jonathan's got his hand up, and UK Finance and our members are working very closely with FloodReady on that issue in terms of what's next after FloodReady.
Fantastic. Now, Jonathan, I'm not going to let you answer that simply. Not only would you look back at why we're here, what's happened last 2 to 3, but I want you to look forward, in terms of, if, we say this is a momentous time, with everything FloodReady is doing and others are doing, what do you think, if the plan succeeds, this action plan succeeds, that the whole PFR sector will look like in 3 to 5 years' time? So with all the stuff you're doing, what's coming on from here? Not just looking back, but how do you really see, gazing forward, what do you think the ideal situation will be in about 3 to 5 years' time if this works?
Well, I mean, in the report itself, it's a great question, and the report does have all those 5-year targets. But I think a big piece of it is starting with the initial question, what's changed? I mean, there's a lot more awareness. There's a lot more, I would say, anxiety about what it is, but also on the positive side, a realization that PFR can contribute to this. And so, seeing that mainstreaming, which from now into 5 years, I think our big piece of the puzzle really is the flood performance certificate. And so we can probably come back to that. I see a couple questions on it, but really mainstreaming that as a vehicle for householder awareness, as well as tracking what exists within a household, so that you have not only things that are kind of pushing uninsurability, but you're having things that can drive insurability and that can allow the demonstration of resilience features in the home. But in 5 years, the key, and I think all the pieces of the FloodReady report really point towards scale, consistency, and visibility, so that householders know what they're getting, they know, and it can be something that's cost competitive and seen as working across the board and evaluated as such. So I think it's all pushing it in the right direction, many boats in the same direction, I guess.
Fantastic. Looks like the future is looking better already. Leo.
Thanks. I mean, there's a case for disagreeing with the premise of the question here. I mean, because mainstreaming PFR was identified as a need, as Richard said earlier, 10 years ago in the previous report. So what's changed now? I think one of the things to look at is the policy context, because 10 years on, government is now at the beginning of a major new home building program. And we've got to get that right, because lots of those new homes, a substantial proportion, are going to be built in areas that are at flood risk. And we also need to, there's going to be a lot more social homes built within that context as well, and it's vital that they're protected. But we've also seen that the government are showing a willingness to act across government. They've set up the Flood Resilience Task Force. So there's an opportunity here as well to get PFR recognised across government. So I think in answer to your second question, if we succeed, we're going to see PFR integrated as standard in new homes and new towns even, which are coming up.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. I'd like to pick one of the questions that, perhaps a statement, and see what the panel thinks about this statement. That it's from Jeff. It's essential that flood resilient construction is not used to justify building. So I guess there is this concern that buildings that are probably never meant to be in the floodplain or in particular places are now being justified just by the context of PFR. Anyone has thoughts on that on the panel? Tatiana.
Thanks, Phil. I think this is a really good point, actually, and government will have this in mind in any decision that is made around anything new that goes into the national planning framework. I think it's part of the reason why maybe PFR has been not super promoted in the MPPF in the past. I may be wrong about that. I don't have 15 years of history in UK government. But yeah, this is a really delicate balance to strike. The fact that you're building resilience should not be an excuse to go build in the floodplain. And so we need to be very careful taking that point on board within any decisions that will be made in planning. And this is also why, these things take time. And we really need to consider all the aspects. And I think the Environment Agency has a very strong view about this. I'll let Richard come in.
Yeah, Tatiana makes a really good point. So you're absolutely right. I mean, planning policy is very, very clear that building in areas at high flood risk should be avoided. What the great unknown is what the future holds. So we could look at the best information that we've got at the moment, and that will provide a forecast of what the risk will be for the development's lifetime, so including climate change. So over the next 100 years for residential development. But that's uncertain. Nobody's got a crystal ball, so we're using best estimates. So actually building in some form of resilience into a property that is not shown to be at risk at the moment, and maybe isn't even shown to be at risk over the next 100 years, I think the question needs to be asked about whether that is a good approach from the point of view of we are seeing more and more surface water events, for example, where you just get a big dump of heavy rain on one particular place, maybe not even shown to be at risk on any of our maps. So actually, some form of just inbuilt resilience could really help to reduce the damages with properties like that. So completely agree with the sentiment. We shouldn't be using it to build in high flood risk areas as they're shown now, or in the future. But we should be looking perhaps to build in some form of inherent resilience into every new building.
So hopefully that gives the comfort that we're not saying PFR is best in his sliced bread, and we're still it's just part of the whole jigsaw, and it has its place. Fantastic. I'll take another question. This is a bit of a long one, and I think as people, it keeps moving around on my screen, so hopefully I can get it to stop so I can read it. If I can find it again. Where's it gone? I'll try another one. I don't know what's happened. It's probably been responded to and then it's just moved. Given that current legislation inhibits construction within those areas considered at highest risk of flooding, and such features have been highlighted to have great benefits in reducing flood risk from surface water, has there been any discussion on how such features can be incorporated into established properties and neighborhoods that lie in areas at high risk? Again, this is more SODS than PFR, but again, we recognize at the property level they also come together. Anyone wants to have a go at that? Seems to have a few people who have thumbed it up as well. Paul.
Yeah, a great question. So there's quite a lot of work that's gone into looking at opportunities to retrofit sustainable drainage. So, and I do think there is a sweet spot that needs to be researched between the height, duration, and type of flooding that SUDS can deal with and PFR. And I think there's an interaction there around maybe residual risk. The overall question, particularly around retrofitting, is that there is quite a lot of work out there at the moment in terms of examples of retrofitting. Some of it's been delivered by water companies, which is about trying to, some of it's reducing the amount of water that enters into a sewer system, but there will also be a benefit in terms of that would increase and improve the flood resilience and the way that surface water is being managed. I'd encourage people to look at SUSDrain, www.susdrain.org, for a number of case studies there about retrofitting, and also Greater London Authority has produced a series of guidance documents around how to retrofit around certain building types. So there's certainly one there around housing associations, schools, and public buildings. So SUDS and retrofit delivery has been quite well serviced, but I do think there's some research and some guidance and maybe principles that we need to look at in terms of the interplay between SUDS and PFR, particularly when you think about the recent risk assessment that Richard was talking about that highlights how much of that is around less than 30 centimetres, which is where SUDS and PFR can really deliver those benefits.
Thanks, Paul. Again, the more I see this, the more it's just, I'm glad we're building SODS and PFR together. I think that's one of the big things that's happening at the moment, which is fantastic. Another question, FPC may be a way forward to highlight a property's flood resilient measures. Will this FPC take into account, oh no, it's just moved halfway through. Will this FPC take into account how at risk a property actually is, as well as the mechanisms implemented? With the variety of funding and government incentives to improve energy efficiency, will similar funding also be made for PFR measures? So I assume that Jonathan might want to respond to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, there's a lot of things to work through on the FPC to develop a widespread, fully implementable, effectively national standard. But the overall approach to it at this juncture is really to improve the level of information about what is contained in the home. Because right now, there are quite a few models out there that will tell you your risk, NAFRA2 being the most immediately available publicly facing version of these, but other ones used by insurers. So there's different views on what depth, etc. But there is basically no current lens on where on the home, its level of resilience, where water could enter a home, essentially at what depth you are vulnerable. So right now, we are really concentrating our efforts on improving the information where there is the biggest gap. And then there's the consideration about how to take those different assessments. If you know that you are vulnerable to 30 centimeters of depth, there may be assessments that say there an expectation of 50 centimeters, others may say 10, but you have a sense of where you are at that stage. And then I've forgotten the second part of the question. Sorry.
Oh,
But maybe
just see. With the variety of funding and government incentives to improve energy efficiency, will similar funding be made for PFR measures?
Well, so there is BBB, that is one version of it. There is the Environment Agency PFR scheme, that is the sort of build better before, let's say, or you know, schemes of that sort. And it should be said that in October, government announced changes to the funding formula that will allow PFR schemes to be done through the main budget, which should essentially and change the considerations to sort of better protected metric to a value for money metric, which should allow a lot more schemes to progress. So we'd like to, it's not quite the same as those energy efficiency schemes, but there are now a lot more mechanisms for householders to get support for PFR. And the point about energy efficiency is a really good one, and one to think through in the next iteration of what needs to be done was also considered in the Bonfield review. So hopefully is something that as these schemes start coming forward, we can start to integrate to a kind of climate ready home. But for now, I'll turn it over to other panelists.
Let's study over that quickly because there's actually a question from Flood Mary on FPC, so I thought we might as well deal with that as well. Do we need a FloodReady 2.0, which will guarantee flood insurance for those who have installed PFR in partnership with flood protection certificates?
Oh, it's a great question. And in a way, if we get flood performance certificates right, you may not need a FloodReady 2.0. If you see what's happened in California, so LA, obviously there's massive deinsurance with the wildfires there. You saw that huge parts of the city were uninsured during this recent set of fires. But what they've implemented is something called Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety Standard, where essentially if you demonstrate that certain measures have been undertaken in your home, there are a large number of insurers who will guarantee coverage. And that was the worst insurance gap we know of in the world, effectively, or at least the greatest example of deinsurance. So there is a pretty good example of how to turn that tide back. That being said, we need to get that mechanism in place. There's a real push on FPCs, and so that's why we really consider it to be a top priority to really move this forward, because that homeowner visibility, that standardization of mechanism that you can demonstrate that your home is resilient should allow for there to be coverage, even with or without a FloodReady.
Exactly. Leo, do you want to add to that or the previous question, maybe?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to the comparison with funding for energy efficiency, which I think is a really interesting point. Jonathan's right, as far as best I understand it, that DEFRA money for capital grant in aid schemes is now going to be eligible. PFR is going to be eligible for that kind of big bucks funding from April, I believe. Key to actually getting that money to PFR, and Richard will correct me if I'm wrong, is local authorities proposing. So a sort of key point for beating the PFR grant is going to shift over to the local authority level. So we want to see local authorities proposing PFR programs in relation to the grant and aid scheme. However, there's still potentially quite a key difference between the big bucks that are available for energy efficiency, because some of that money is very effectively earmarked for low-income housing through the Warm Homes Fund, which is specifically for social housing. So there's a big question on whether low-income housing is actually ever going to benefit from PFR. And if that's the case, it would be an enormous shame, because it's that kind of multiple occupancy housing often, which has potentially a lot to gain from PFR. So yeah, I would encourage the sector to be making the case for local authorities for PFR schemes, low income housing, the grant and aid scheme program.
You, Leo. Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Fowler. Just picking up on that FPC point and affordable insurance and the FloodReady 2.0. Just before Christmas, the Ministry of Housing and Communities put a consultation out on potential future changes to the home buying and selling process. And one of the things that they're talking about there and discussing is the provision by homeowners and property owners, I should say, of upfront information packs that you will provide the data and information about the property you are selling to the estate agent before the property goes on the market. And I think for those homes that some are subject to flooding or have been flooded in the past, I think the FPC will start to become a standard requirement for potential purchasers and also included in this pack. So I think given that focus, if that is implemented, that change to the home buying and selling process, I think we will start to see a natural adoption of FPCs for those homes that are subject to flooding. And linked to that with Build Back Better, those homes that have been flooded in the past, I think with the introduction of FPCs, the aim will be to make sure that flood-proof materials and flood resilient materials are used when they're refitting homes and refurbishing homes that have been subject to flooding. So whether that is putting water resistant flooring down, moving the electrics up to 2 meters, or sorry, a meter and a half up the wall, or in terms of using plaster that is waterproof. I think we'll start to see that becoming standard because it will become in the homeowner's interest. And once you start seeing something in the homeowner's interest, and it'll impact the sales price of a property, that's when you start to see adoption.
Richard.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the funding question about that link across with energy efficiency, and there's been a couple of really good points made about the flood risk investment program. So yeah, as of April, there are some changes coming in respect of the way that flood risk management schemes in general are funded, and property flood resilience schemes are part of that. So we are still likely to see property flood resilience schemes coming forward. So risk management authorities like the Environment Agency, local authorities, water companies can put forward schemes for property flood resilience. It's usually those places at the highest risk, and where the type of scheme that provides the best value and is likely to have the most impact is PFR, then that can be put forward for funding. A couple of the big changes that we're seeing from April are it used to be very, very difficult to get funding for these schemes. So the granting aid funding would in general provide around about half of the funding, and then the rest would need to be provided from other sources like the homeowner, or through regional flood and coastal committees, through local levy or other sources. Now that's changing. So the first £3 million of any scheme will be fully funded, which is great for PFR because the vast majority of them tend to be under £3 million. The other key aspect that's changing, which links back to the point that Leo made, is that there is going to be a specific measure around vulnerability. So we're looking at directing more of the investment towards more vulnerable communities, and hence there is going to be a target in place to make sure that they take a specific proportion of the amount of spend that there will be on FCRM schemes. So that is a really key part. We want to be supporting the most vulnerable communities because they are more susceptible to the sorts of damage, less likely to have insurance, for example. And so the flooding coastal erosion risk management program is kind of taking that as a metric, and from April we'll be measuring our success against that. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. So I'd like to move a question that deals with something completely different now. What work has gone into educating communities on PFR and managing their own flood risk? So do you think there's been a shift in behaviors to understanding flood risk? Now, of course, all of us know how much Flood Mary has been all over the place in the last 5 years or so. But what are all the other things that we're doing really to educate people on PFR? Anyone likes to take that question? Very good.
Yeah, I'll make a start with this one. So, yeah, as you've just mentioned, the work that FloodReady does out in the communities has been very, very important in this space. The Environment Agency's worked with Mary over the last sort of couple of years or so to look at targeting community engagement in places where we think it would have the most benefit. And actually, we've been doing some feedback surveys afterwards, which have seen that most people who are going away from these events have learnt a lot and have also said that they would be looking to install PFR measures in their property, say within a year after the feedback survey has taken place. So actually, when we are out there in communities speaking to people, we get some really good feedback because we're there on people's doorsteps, talking to them in their communities. I think a lot of the national messaging we've been finding isn't quite hitting the mark. So people may be aware or may not be that the Environment Agency does a public tracker survey every single year, which looks at how engaged people are with their risk. And actually, it hasn't changed much over the past few years. So we do National Flood Action Week. We do all sorts of other comms through a variety of different avenues, like social media, like mainstream media. But that hasn't really changed. But when we have done the sort of hyper-local stuff, so we ran a few hyper-local campaigns within Flood Action Week or just after Flood Action Week over the last few years, and what we found is that they have much more of an impact than the national stuff. So actually, I think that is a key message for us all. We are all part of a community. We all work with particular communities. So how can we enable better messaging, better engagement with those communities, and not necessarily do it all ourselves? We know that there are some very, very proactive flood groups out there who are trusted within their communities. So how can we give them the right information so that they can be advocates for it within their communities? And I'll let others come in now.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, only to add really that I think the fact that the Build Back Better scheme is in force now and taken up by most insurers means that there's a greater awareness amongst loss adjusters and surveyors. So you start to have conversations, numerous conversations that PFR would never have taken place otherwise with individuals and communities who then talk to each other, and they start to build that knowledge that comes from 20 conversations in a village, which previously, when there was no funding, may have been somebody that heard about it and from somebody locally or somebody else that had been flooded. So there wouldn't be that awareness. So I think as has been said by Richard, I think it's very much community based because we want the overall message from people is there's flood risk. Actually, people want to know about their particular area and they want to know what they can do in their house. And I don't think that fits terribly well in general messaging. I think the general messaging is important, but then you need more detailed local knowledge.
Okay, Graham.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that following the Pathfinder project a few years back now, which is obviously where the Floodmobile originated from, but also we developed the centre over at Wallingford, and we can't pick that up and take it around the country as we can with the Floodmobile, obviously. So it is a fixed asset, but it's proved really quite popular with people and local groups. So when there was some flooding in Wallingford in the local area, obviously they got in touch with us and they come around and we could show them things. So there's always that, and connecting with that and connecting through the LRFs. We have the LRFs there now doing their quarterly meetings. So there are things that you can do, but obviously the Floodmobile is successful because it's mobile. And we've got 3 out there now, actually. We've still got the one down in Cornwall, we've got the Thames Valley one that Mary's now travelling around with, and one in Scotland. So if we could get more of those, but obviously more people to man them, that would be fantastic.
Conscious time is getting against me. There's one final question I want to bring in before I bring Paul in. And this, in essence, actually, Graham, it's good that you're actually on at the moment. The question is, how will the PFR products, be made accessible? I know earlier during one of the presentations, there was a talk about, wanting them, to be available at, building merchants and stuff like that more easily. But then we recognize that PFR is also about understanding the actual issues. Where is the water coming in? Knowing the things about and putting the right things in the right places. If you've got 6 places and you deal with 5, you might not have bothered. And so the concept of how do we get products out there as readily, but how do we also then make sure that that doesn't mean people just pick the wrong things and put in the wrong places and waste their money? Obviously, with your role in IFRA as the people who are really working, the people working with this, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the Floodmobile does that as well. That actually educates people in that. But from an IFRA point of view, I guess we are looking to put a showcase on next year to actually demonstrate to bring people in, and that's probably going to be a government thing. It's the flood minister that's interested in setting that up, and Tatiana knows about it as well. So we want to do a bit of a roadshow, if you like, to demonstrate to people what businesses are out there, because the PFR industry is currently very small. It needs to grow, and we hope to grow that industry. But it's very small at the moment. So people don't really fully understand there is an industry. They just hear about, you need some PFR, you need a flood door, you need a barrier. But if they really understood what goes into it, how that's developed. So we're looking off the back of the latest review, actually, to get the products and the manufacturers from PFR into Peter Capelhorn and that area, into the centre that they got in London. So it's recognised as a trade body, if you like, that can actually deliver these products, rather than you go into B&Q and buy them, or you go into Travis Perkins and buy them. You need to do that as well, but that education piece needs to be done. So through the roadshow, and hopefully getting them into Peter Capelhorn and the organisation there, then that will help promote that. But it's a challenge, because it's what grows first. Does all the products and services come first, or does the funding and the schemes and the need and demand for PFR come first? So it's bring it on, but that's what this review is about, isn't it? So.
Well, a fantastic conundrum, really, which comes before which. But I think the important thing is that, listen, the industry is growing, and we just need to make sure that as we get the things out there, the education is going with it. I think at that point, I'd like to bring this session to a close. Really, thank you very much for the panel. Thank you for your fantastic questions. And what I'd like to do now is to pass on to Paul to sort of do a bit of an overview of BeFloodReady. But also, Paul, while you're there, we have a lot of other questions we've not been able to answer. You might just want to say what we might do with that, and how we might get back to people on that. Over to you, Paul.
Great. Well, thanks, Phil, and thank you for the panelists for that time. So in terms of the questions, what I'd like to do is probably actually some of those questions might be easily answered by some of the FAQ on the BeFloodReady website. So, and this really talks to the point that was raised before about what's been done to raise awareness. So BeFloodReady is a growing brand to support property flood resilience. The Floodmobile, the latest incarnation of that, has got the BeFloodReady logo on there, and there's also an initiative that's been used by local authorities for them to promote PFR to their residents within there. And we're running a community of practice, really, which is focused on the opportunities to create a sense of community for both the professionals that are involved in delivering PFR, but also the public, to make sure that there's a consolidated and consistent view on what good practice looks like. And the idea behind the community practice is to support competency and confidence in PFR. And via that, we're on the website. We've got around 140 or 150 resources that can be searched and could be presented on other topics relating to PFR. We've also got the list of our specialists that have gone through the specialist register for PFR, which are primarily surveyors and also building contractors. And we're obviously delivering events like this. So there's lots of opportunities to find out more on PFR through the BeFloodReady community of practice. I'm conscious that time's running out, but there's an opportunity here, if you scan here, for you to join a mailing list for us to send out further information. And we're looking to continue BeFloodReady as a community of practice for the next couple of years. So if there's any organizations that are willing to support that, please do let me know. So, and for the future, obviously, we're going to have PFR is going to be featured at Flooding Coast in Liverpool later in June, and there's some further work that we're delivering on events. So I'd encourage colleagues to look at our CIWEM events page. So without any further ado, and with 1 minute left, I'll pass you back to Fowler.
Thanks, Paul, for doing that very quickly. Yeah, I think it's just left for me really to sort of look at the day, and I think to thank thank the panel, the speakers. Hopefully from the presentation and Q&A, you have got some better appreciation of the FloodReady Action Plan and some of the initiatives underway being planned to help improve resilience and mainstream PFR. As professionals, we really need to help to ensure that there's an awareness of approaches as to become better prepared and to be resilient to flooding. So all that's left for me now to do really is to thank the speakers and the audience, and again, just to thank the partners and supporters of the BeFloodReady that you can see on the screen. Without them, this won't be happening. And yes, please do join the BeFloodReady and continue to be part of this kind of programs into the future. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.